Cold plunging daily is one of the dumbest things you can do. You're basically just aging yourself faster for a mood boost. Don't blindly hop on this bandwagon just because it's sexy.
1, 2, 3.
Oh.
The signals that you're sending to your brain is like 911. And your brain is overriding that.
Right.
Because it's saying, hey, stay here for 3 minutes. We're going to be able to send more emails this afternoon.
Right. You're having basically near-death experiences every morning.
Yeah.
How long can you do that for?
Wim Hof looks like he's 130. I'm doing this new mental health exercise technique. I jump out of an airplane every morning. And I feel like I'm just more focused.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm more focused. I can send more emails.
Yeah. I'm a sunrise jumper. That's just what I do every day to start my day.
You don't? Oh,
Yeah.
you don't?
Oh, you
That's
don't?
just
Oh.
a couple of us have been doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm sure.
It's okay. It's this new thing.
Yeah.
Mike, you were just cold plunging a second ago, right?
Yeah, right before this podcast, I did a nice little cold plunge prep.
I'm glad that these types of clips are circulating right now, because I do think it helps soften some of the madness where people, again, are telling people what to do in order to heal and how to age as best as possible. But these guys, I think they had a necessary dose of lightness to the conversation. And Mike, what were you thinking watching this, aside from drying off from your cold plunge?
Yeah, so with the cold plunging stuff, this goes with the whole hormetic theme, right? So the idea that you're going to drive a stressor, and then you get a benefit from the stress itself. And I think it's really important that you actually parse out the stress and the specific effect here. And so there's papers where there's different types of cold plunging. So you have like longer term cold exposure, and then you have shorter term, and then the cold temperatures aren't as cold, and then you have shorter term cold exposure where you have much colder temperatures, and it can either be through air or it could either be through water. But fundamentally, regardless of which one of these that you do, you get an increase in stress hormones, particularly the catecholamines. So you have noradrenaline and dopamine drastically increase, and you also get increases in aldosterone as well. Now, the reason that these hormones are increasing is because they are trying to, number one, increase your heat expenditure, help you to generate more heat to combat this cold exposure. But the main thing acutely is to shift blood flow. And the shifting of that blood flow moves the blood towards the internal organs to keep them at an appropriate temperature, because there's a reason that we run at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. Most of our enzymatic function and our metabolic functions require an optimal temperature for things to work effectively. This is why if you put your food in the refrigerator, it preserves it longer, because it slows down enzymatic degradation or enzymatic processes inside the food. So basically, it's very stressful for the body to be at these temperatures. And for example, there's a paper where they had people go in 57 degree Fahrenheit water, 14 degrees Celsius water for an hour, and they saw noradrenaline increases of 530%, dopamine increases of 250%, and aldosterone increases of 23%. So massive increases in the catecholamines, which are stress hormones. That's basically inducing a stress response. Now, the benefit of the cold exposure is, when what people talk about is, they say that it increases HRV and it increases parasympathetic activity. So it seems to help manage stress. And obviously you have the cold thermogenesis stuff where you upregulate brown adipose tissue, whatever. And this also occurs through the catecholamines as well. And again, the reason that's increasing is to help you manage your body temperature under exposure to cold environments. But the parasympathetic benefit is quite a weird thing, because the way that the parasympathetic system is upregulated with the cold plunging or the cold exposure is that you have to have the catecholamines, noradrenaline and dopamine, bring your blood flow to your core organs and then raise the pressure inside the arteries so that you trigger the barrel reflex. So basically a pressure reflex that then causes the activation of your parasympathetic nervous system. So it's like you have to drive a serious stress response first to shift all of your blood flow away from the periphery towards the center around the organs, raise the internal pressure of the central arteries so that you then have a reflexive parasympathetic response. So it's like a very weird way to be like, I'm going to become less stressed by stressing myself out to the point that I then need to drive an anti-stress response to that stress. And the thing that doesn't get looked at here with these exposures is people say, oh, well, you know, this was the outcome. But it's like, what is the effect of the trigger to get the outcome? What is the effect of drastically increasing catecholamines on a more daily basis in the morning so that you then get this parasympathetic response? Because every time you drive the catecholamines, you shift metabolism, you lower body temperature, things like this. There are effects of those things. And they can be, they're cumulative. We know they're cumulative. We know the effects of cumulative exposure to catecholamines. It's like not even controversial that higher levels of catecholamines are associated with damaging the vasculature and also driving aldosterone is part of the RAS system, which is directly involved in damaging the vasculature, hypertension, blood pressure issues, etc., and also kidney dysfunction. So it's not saying that the acute cold exposure is going to do this, but the point here is that you're looking for this anti-stress benefit by driving significant stress. And then the effects of those stresses, I think, are like could be cumulative, especially if you're doing cold exposure every single morning. It's like that over time. It's like people are like, well, it's just a short time. It's like, yeah, but every day, like every morning you're having this effect. And it's not even that it's just like, well, if I just do it a little bit, it's not a problem. It's like there's direct effects of these hormones that are problematic in and of themselves. And we've actually talked about this in other videos where chronic exposure to catecholamines can actually damage the mitochondria directly by forcing fat oxidation and by forcing the excess production of reactive oxygen species, which damage the protein structures and cell membranes of the mitochondria to the point that the mitochondria fatigue. So I think we need to be careful in all these conversations. And this clip is very helpful with this because it gets to the root of this in a hilarious way, pointing out that, hey, this thing we're doing is like very stressful. And it's like, maybe I'll answer more emails because I have these stress hormones floating around that drive wakefulness and activity level. But at the same time, it's like, what is the long-term effect of that on our health? What is the cumulative effect of that? And then even like, well, if I jump out of the airplane, you know, it's the same thing. Like you will get this catecholaminergic response. And it also goes with some of the fasting stuff as well. People are like, wow, I just had so much energy. I'm so awake. I'm so alert. Until eventually it's like, well, I can't sleep at all now. Like I sleep 4 hours. And it's through these stress hormones. So we really need to be clear on, sure, like driving parasympathetic function may have a benefit, but how you go about doing that is really important. Right? That's something that you really want to be clear about because these things do have cumulative negative impact on the physiologic systems, and driving the stress comes at a cost. So it's not just a pure upside. There's a risk versus reward on this specific upside that we have, and then the downside that's required to generate it.
Mike, I'm so glad you brought up the mechanisms behind that parasympathetic, almost whiplash response, because I've seen a lot of people in the nervous system space saying, actually, we are right about cold plunges. They do stimulate a parasympathetic calming response. This can heal your trauma. This will regulate you. But understanding kind of the murkier underpinnings, I think, will be helpful for people, especially, I mean, thinking long term, like you were mentioning, the cumulative effect. We don't want to be unintentionally shooting ourselves in the foot only to realize years later what we've kind of accumulated and stacked against our favor.
Just one thing really quick is to point out there, Theresa, is that if you have somebody who is already exceptionally stressed out and they are exceptionally sick, and then you put them into this extremely stressful circumstance, there is the possibility and opportunity that you push this person over the edge in terms of the stress response. You put them in a circumstance where they actually, like maybe they get sick after doing cold exposure. And I've had quite a few clients where that's actually been the case, where they have done the cold exposure after like being in a rough spot, and it has put them over the edge.
Yeah, good to be aware of that. Yeah, it might not be the healing modality that it's been sold as, and just understanding. I mean, life is filled with stress even when you're living in the mountains or, you know, working for yourself and coaching incredible clients, and to understand that we don't need to be adding too many intentional stressors. I do see the benefit of, you know, doing challenging things from a more almost like a self-expansion approach and pushing your limits and working on projects that are challenging but stimulating and rewarding. Those might be better stressors, I'm quoting, stressors to play around with less severe side effects. Jay, I see you nodding your head. What are your thoughts on this funny clip?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of great points here. I think they do a good job of articulating things that sometimes we struggle to because they're looking at it from such a layperson perspective. But the idea of making your body think that it's going to die just to feel a little better after, or just to feel a little bit less stress after, or get into that parasympathetic state, I think does a really good job of kind of touching on what's going on underneath. And, really has been something that's gone mainstream. We see it everywhere, and I hear it on podcasts, kind of in all different spheres. It's crazy how much it has. And most people are doing it not thinking that there's any cost to this physiologically. The idea is that this is something that leads to X outcome. It leads to better mood. Maybe it leads to a better parasympathetic state, leads to better energy throughout the day. And there's no concept or even lip service given or thought given to the mechanism through which that's happening. And as soon as you point out that it is stress driven by the fact that your body is being put into a really, really harsh environment, and of course, in this case, one that is potentially one that could kill it, so it has to react and bring your body back to a homeostatic state where it can actually survive. And in this case, you're upregulating, heat production and tons of other factors. And so as soon as that happens, I think it really shifts the perspective a little bit, ideally, and, into something where you are getting that energy at a cost. You're getting that mood boost at a cost, or even you're getting that parasympathetic relaxation at a cost of putting your body into a severe state of stress. And, you pointed out something that's important, Theresa, which is this idea of doing things that are challenging, doing things that are difficult to do. And there's a balance to be had there, right? I think the idea that life, it just has to be pure hardship. And if you're not doing difficult things, like you're not living, I think that, we want to be careful with that. We don't all need to be, in a boot camp all the time. But at the same time, there's also a difference between doing things that are challenging for a constructive end, which you were kind of getting at, as opposed to doing something that, even something like a cold plunge that has no constructive end. You could say there's a potential benefit toward trying to find something difficult to do and get value out of it. But honestly, as I'm saying it, I feel like it more is just like, if that's what you need to do to get value out of your life, maybe we want to consider where else we could do that. Are there other areas of our life that we could try to do things that are difficult and are challenging, but could actually be constructive and also give us that same feeling of accomplishment? Because this is something that's coming at a direct cost to our health. Even if we're not doing it every day, the question is, coming back to the hormetic question, is this actually something that's beneficial? Because that changes everything. And maybe we'll play the next clip because they touch on one of the central tenets of hormesis, like the central idea of what's called the dose response curve, where if you have too much of a stimulus, it's bad, too little, it's bad. But if you get the right amount, that's when your body adapts in a beneficial way. And it's a concept that we really disagree with. They share it here in a really funny way. So we can listen to that and then chat about it a little bit.
Everyone would have survived the Titanic if they'd known about the Wim Hof method. Like if they'd just focused on slow breathing and mindful.
It would have been weird to think if Wim Hof was on the Titanic, he would have actually just been swimming around.
Yeah, he would have been in the water already.
Yeah. He would have been having a great time. People forget is that there was a point during the mass freezing of the passengers of the Titanic where they were actually healthier.
Yeah.
Before they froze to death. It would have been a rush of the benefits of an ice bath.
So they would have, you're right. They would have gotten healthier for a bit and then died.
From the moment they got in the water, you start the clock, and for probably like 3 minutes,
the bell curve
goes up, and it's better.
Circulation.
Yep.
Oh, I'm gonna get so many things done today.
Yes.
Oh,
yes. Fantastic.
Oh man.
Let's talk about hormesis. I think they opened up a great door for us here. Jay, I'll let you start.
Yeah, those passengers on the Titanic, they were really close to having productive days. Oh man. Yes. So what they're getting at here is this concept that things that are really toxic and can and will kill you can lead to benefits if given in the right dose. That's the idea behind cold plunging. It's the idea generally behind hormesis. That's what the idea of hormesis is. And this includes not just things like cold plunging, but classically it was like mercury, arsenic, cadmium, things that are inherently toxic and will kill you. But the idea being if you just provide them in a small enough dose, then you can find this optimal range where your body says, I'm going to mount a defensive reaction against this and be stronger as a result. And then since then, it's been extrapolated to tons of different things like exercise and fasting and low carb diets and calorie restriction. And Mike touched on this earlier with stress effects and specific effects. And I don't want to weigh this podcast down too much with the details of this because we went through it in a 4-part podcast series on the Energy Balance podcast. I think it was starting with episode 76. But if you just search hormesis, you'll find it somewhere in the 70s, maybe it was 73. But in any case, the idea being that the stress from these things is not actually beneficial. The stress leads to adaptations, but those adaptations are actually things that are going to degrade our function over time in an effort to prepare us for future stress. So if we're constantly dealing with intense cold from something like a cold exposure, the way our bodies adapt is that every day they're going to allocate less resources toward immune function, digestion, cognitive function, reproduction, because they're expecting that they're about to face more and more of these really intense stressors that they need a ton of energy for. And that's why they require such massive increases in adrenaline and also cortisol and glucagon, shown in various studies. And upregulation of fatty acid oxidation, all the things that were said are beneficial, that are really just intense stress responses. And that's what that adaptation to stress is. It's preparation for future stress, and it actually is something that comes at the cost of health. And that's very different from the effects that are called the specific effects, which are everything that's not the stress. So when we take something like exercise, for example, there's a ton of specific effects. There's tension put on the musculoskeletal, musculofascial system. There's increased circulation, increased lymphatic flow, tons of different factors that are all beneficial and have, are unique to exercise. And yet there's also the stressor effect where it depletes energy and can cause stress. And that stress side is actually never beneficial, but those other things can outweigh the stress. When we take something like cold plunging, for the most part, we're really just getting really intense, severe stress, and it's going to be coming at a cost. And that adaptation, the adaptation to that stress is not something that benefits us in the long term and is not the way to better health. We don't want to stress ourselves to better health. We can't actually stress ourselves to better health. So, and of course, as most people know, in the chronic degenerative states, these are states of intense physiological stress to begin with, a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation, and typically a lot of environmental stress as well. So that would kind of be the short of it from my end. I don't want to dig too much into the physiology because we can get into the weeds very easily. If you enjoyed that clip, you'll definitely want to download the free Energy Balance Food Guide. The Energy Balance Food Guide will help you determine exactly what to eat to optimally support your metabolism and help you lose weight, improve your digestion, get amazing sleep, boost your energy, and so much more. The food guide makes it extremely easy to get started with a bioenergetic approach to optimizing your health. So head over to jfeldmanwellness.com/guide to download your free Energy Balance Food Guide.